Marcus Johnson, a brilliant 23-year-old mechanical engineering student, stops to help an elderly white woman with her broken motorized wheelchair in a snowstorm. As he works, her driver watches suspiciously from a luxury car. Marcus has no idea that Eleanor Whitfield is the wealthiest woman in Massachusetts, or that this chance encounter will transform his life from being racially profiled at his university to becoming the unexpected heir to a technological empire. The bitter wind bites through his thin jacket as he tightens the final screw, unaware that in this moment of simple kindness, his entire future is about to change forever, challenging everything he believes about opportunity in America. The freezing February morning found Marcus in his usual spot at the back of Professor Harrington's Advanced Mechanical Engineering lecture, his notebooks meticulously organized, despite his exhaustion from the overnight shift at Benson's Auto Repair. The professor's eyes skimmed past him repeatedly when Marcus raised his hand to answer questions, a familiar experience that stung no less with repetition. After class, Marcus hurried across campus, snow crunching beneath his worn boots as he navigated the grand buildings of Cambridge Technical Institute, where he remained largely invisible, despite maintaining a nearly perfect GPA. His apartment in South Boston was small but immaculate, the living room transformed into a bedroom for his mother, Vanessa, whose multiple sclerosis had progressively worsened over the past 5 years. Marcus entered quietly, setting down his backpack before checking on her. She was awake, her warm smile contrasting with the pain evident in her eyes. The daily rituals were performed with practiced efficiency. Medication administered, physical therapy exercises completed, breakfast prepared. Their conversation flowed easily despite their circumstances, Vanessa asking about his classes, while Marcus carefully omitted the frequent slights and microaggressions that punctuated his academic experience. His scholarship covered tuition but little else, forcing him to work 30 hours weekly at the auto shop, where at least his mechanical skills were valued without question. The previous week had brought a particularly bitter disappointment when Professor Harrington had praised Marcus's innovative battery cooling system, but somehow attributed the work to his lab partner, Tyler Matthews. The professor had enthusiastically introduced Tyler to visiting industry representatives, while Marcus stood silently nearby, invisible once again. That evening, as Marcus adjusted his mother's specialized bedding, the weight of it all had nearly crushed him. His voice barely above a whisper, he confessed, "Maybe this isn't worth it, Mom. Maybe some doors aren't meant to open for people like me." Vanessa's response came swift and certain, her hand surprisingly strong as she grasped his wrist. "Your great-grandfather walked 60 miles to register to vote and was turned away 3 times before succeeding. Your grandfather integrated his engineering firm despite death threats. Your father received patents for inventions that changed aviation safety while being paid half what his white colleagues earned. Johnson men don't quit when barriers appear, they find ways through, over, or around." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words and the 4 generations of persistence they represented. Later, in the cramped bathroom that doubled as his workshop space, he returned to the miniature prototype he'd been developing, a more efficient motorized wheel system that could revolutionize mobility devices. His phone alarm reminded him of his evening shift, and he carefully tucked the prototype into its hiding place behind the medicine cabinet. Walking to work through the intensifying snowstorm, Marcus repeated his mother's words like a mantra, unaware that 3 miles away, in the prestigious Beacon Hill neighborhood, Eleanor Whitfield was preparing to venture out into the same storm for her weekly board meeting at Whitfield Technologies, the mobility device company that had made her one of the wealthiest women in America. The certified letter arrived on Tuesday, 3 days after Marcus had helped the elderly woman in the snowstorm. The Whitfield Technologies letterhead caught him off guard, the embossed silver wheelchair insignia instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with mobility devices. His hands trembled slightly as he read the formal invitation to interview for their prestigious Innovation Internship program, a position typically reserved for graduate students from elite universities. Marcus reread the letter 4 times, wondering if it was some elaborate prank engineered by classmates who resented his academic success despite his background. His mother examined the letter carefully, noting the personalized signature from Eleanor Whitfield herself. The company founder, whose husband's paralysis in Vietnam had inspired her to pioneer advanced mobility technologies. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning, forcing Marcus to request time off from both his classes and his job. His supervisor at the auto shop granted the time grudgingly, while his professors responded to his absence notification emails with varying degrees of skepticism about his interview claim. Thursday morning found Marcus navigating the gleaming glass headquarters of Whitfield Technologies in Cambridge's technology corridor, his single suit freshly pressed, though slightly too small across the shoulders. The security desk presented the first obstacle, with guards scrutinizing his ID with unusual thoroughness, making phone calls to verify his appointment despite his name appearing on their visitor log. The receptionist maintained a professional but cool demeanor as she directed him to wait in the lobby rather than the interview suite, where other candidates were being greeted with coffee and conversation. Marcus sat patiently for 40 minutes past his scheduled time, maintaining his composure even as several white candidates arrived after him but were escorted in immediately. When finally ushered into the conference room, Marcus faced 6 white executives who appeared surprised by his presence, despite having his resume before them. Their questions carried subtle undertones that felt all too familiar. "How did you hear about this position?" asked with suspicion rather than interest. "Did someone specifically encourage you to apply?" implying he couldn't have qualified through normal channels. "Your technical background is from Cambridge Technical rather than MIT or Harvard," phrased as though confirming a deficiency. Marcus answered each question with poise and precision, highlighting his perfect GPA, his practical experience at the auto shop, and his self-taught programming skills that complemented his mechanical engineering knowledge. He described his prototype mobility wheel system without mentioning that he'd developed it in a bathroom workshop while caring for his disabled mother. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly when Marcus demonstrated his deep understanding of the company's product line, referencing specific design elements that could be improved. 2 of the younger executives exchanged impressed glances, but the chief technical officer, Richard Kensington, a man in his 50s with carefully cultivated silver hair, maintained an expression of thinly veiled skepticism. As the interview approached its scheduled conclusion with no indication of interest from the panel, Marcus began mentally calculating whether he could still make it to his afternoon shift at the auto shop. Then the conference room door opened unexpectedly. Eleanor Whitfield herself entered, her slender frame supported by one of her company's latest motorized wheelchairs. The executives immediately stood, their demeanor transforming from indifference to deference. Marcus rose too, recognizing the woman whose wheelchair he had repaired during the snowstorm. Recognition flickered in her eyes as well, followed by something that might have been amusement. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice carrying surprising strength. "I believe we've met before." The executives exchanged confused glances as Eleanor continued. "Your assessment of the battery connection in the XR7 model was quite accurate. The cold weather indeed exposes a design flaw that our team has been struggling to address." Richard Kensington cleared his throat, discomfort evident in his posture. "Mrs. Whitfield, we were just concluding this interview. We have several other candidates with more appropriate backgrounds from Harvard and Eleanor," cut him off with a slight wave of her hand. "I've reviewed Mr. Johnson's file personally. His practical approach to engineering problems is exactly what our innovation team needs." She turned directly to Marcus, her gaze steady and evaluating. "The internship position is yours, should you wish to accept it. You'll work directly with our development team on next-generation mobility systems." The room fell silent, tension palpable as the executives processed this unexpected development. Richard recovered first, his smile not reaching his eyes as he offered perfunctory congratulations. Another executive raised immediate concerns about proper channels and established protocols, while a third suggested a probationary arrangement that would place Marcus under heightened supervision. Their objections, thinly veiled behind corporate language, made their discomfort with Eleanor's decision abundantly clear. Marcus stood still, processing both the extraordinary opportunity and the hostile environment he would clearly face if he accepted. Eleanor seemed to read his thoughts, adding quietly, "Sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from those who've had to navigate the world differently, Mr. Johnson. Your insights on our products suggest you might be such a person. The choice before him was complicated. Financial salvation and professional opportunity on one hand, and what promised to be a daily battle against prejudice and resentment on the other. He thought of his mother, of their mounting medical bills, of the modifications their apartment needed to accommodate her declining mobility. With clarity born of necessity, Marcus extended his hand to Eleanor. "I would be honored to accept the position, Mrs. Whitfield." As they shook hands, neither could have predicted the storm that this decision would unleash within Whitfield Technologies, nor how thoroughly it would transform both their lives in the months to come. Marcus arrived for his first day at Whitfield Technologies 30 minutes early, dressed in the best business casual clothing his limited wardrobe could provide. The security guard at the entrance subjected him to another extensive identification check, despite his newly issued employee badge, finally calling Richard Kensington to verify his employment before reluctantly allowing him entry. The human resources orientation was brief and perfunctory, the representative rushing through policy explanations while emphasizing security protocols and confidentiality agreements with unusual intensity. When Marcus inquired about the innovation team he would be joining, the representative seemed genuinely confused, checking her computer several times before informing him that, according to her records, he would be reporting to Richard Kensington in the testing department rather than the development team Eleanor had mentioned. Richard's office reflected his 20 years with the company, awards and patents displayed prominently alongside photos with political and business leaders. His greeting was professional but cold, his explanation of Marcus's duties notably devoid of any innovation work. Instead, Marcus found himself assigned to basic quality control testing, documenting the battery performance of existing wheelchair models under various conditions. The work was far below his qualifications, but provided valuable insight into the company's products. Marcus approached the task methodically, quickly identifying patterns in the performance data that suggested systemic design issues rather than isolated defects. During lunch, he found himself alone in the sprawling company cafeteria, employees who had been welcoming to other new hires giving him a wide berth or offering only the most cursory acknowledgments. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had compiled enough data to draft preliminary recommendations for improving battery performance. When he presented his findings to Richard, the older man barely glanced at the report. "Just log the test results as instructed, Johnson. Analysis isn't part of your responsibilities." For 2 weeks, Marcus performed the mundane testing duties while expanding his analysis in private, staying late after most employees had departed. Security guards frequently interrupted his work with requests to verify his authorization to be in the building after hours. On his 15th day, Marcus discovered a critical safety flaw in the newest mobility device scheduled for release the following month. Under specific temperature conditions, the navigation system could malfunction, potentially causing the chair to accelerate unexpectedly or lose directional control. He documented the issue thoroughly, including replication steps and potential solutions, and submitted an urgent report to Richard. 3 days passed with no acknowledgement. When Marcus inquired about the report, Richard claimed never to have received it, suggesting that Marcus had perhaps misunderstood the submission process. That evening, Marcus reconstructed his entire analysis, working until midnight to ensure the documentation was irrefutable. He was so engrossed that he didn't notice Eleanor Whitfield entering the testing lab, her wheelchair humming quietly across the polished floor. Most people don't stay this late unless they're avoiding going home, or they found something truly fascinating, she observed, startling Marcus from his concentration. He quickly explained the safety issue he'd discovered, showing her the data patterns and demonstration videos he'd recorded. Eleanor studied the materials intently, asking precise technical questions that revealed her deep understanding of the product architecture. After nearly an hour of discussion, she sat back in her wheelchair, her expression thoughtful. "You've identified a problem that our development team missed after 6 months of testing, Mr. Johnson. More importantly, you've outlined 3 potential solutions that could be implemented before the release date." Marcus hesitated before responding. "I submitted this report 3 days ago, but Mr. Kensington says he never received it." Eleanor's expression hardened momentarily, before returning to its usual composed state. "I see. Well, it seems we have two issues to address then." The following morning, Marcus arrived to find an email reassigning him to lead a special project team focused on developing the next generation of adaptive control systems for mobility devices. His new office was located on the executive floor, a glass-walled space previously used for visiting consultants. By lunchtime, the company Grapevine was buzzing with speculation about his sudden promotion and direct connection to Eleanor. Richard Kensington appeared at his new office door late that afternoon, his affable expression belied by the tension in his voice. Quite a leap for someone who's been here less than a month. "Mrs. Whitfield must see something quite special in you." His emphasis made the statement sound more like an accusation than a compliment. "The development team has established protocols and hierarchies, Johnson. Mrs. Whitfield may have placed you here, but success in this company requires more than a powerful patron. It requires earning the respect of those who've built this company through years of dedicated service." As Richard departed, his parting words hung in the air like a promise. "I look forward to seeing whether you can justify Mrs. Whitfield's extraordinary faith in your abilities." Not everyone is suited to the pressures of innovation leadership, particularly those without the proper background. Marcus watched him go, recognizing the declaration of war beneath the corporate pleasantries. That night, as he described the day's developments to his mother, she listened with both pride and concern. "Baby, you've opened a door, but now you need to understand what room you've walked into. People who are accustomed to power rarely surrender it graciously, especially to those they've been taught to consider beneath them." Marcus nodded, understanding the challenge ahead. "I know, Mom. But I also know that Eleanor Whitfield didn't choose me on a whim. She saw something in my work that others missed, and now I have a chance to prove she was right." He didn't share his growing suspicion that Eleanor's interest went beyond his technical skills, that she seemed to be evaluating him for reasons he couldn't yet discern. As he helped his mother into bed that evening, Marcus resolved that whatever Eleanor's motives might be, he would use this opportunity to create the future they both deserved, regardless of the obstacles Richard Kensington and others might place in his path. The first month of Marcus's leadership position proved to be a masterclass in corporate warfare waged through subtle sabotage and calculated exclusion. His special project team initially consisted of junior engineers handpicked by Richard Kensington, their loyalty clearly lying with their original department head rather than their new team leader. Meetings scheduled by Marcus were mysteriously canceled or double-booked, resource requests disappeared into administrative black holes, and crucial information arrived at the last possible moment, if at all. Throughout the company, Richard spread carefully crafted narratives about Marcus's appointment, never directly mentioning race, but emphasizing words like unusual selection process and diversity considerations when discussing Eleanor's decision with fellow executives. The implied message was clear. Marcus was a token hire, chosen for optics rather than ability, and his team's work should be regarded with skepticism. Despite these challenges, Marcus methodically developed his concept for an adaptive control system that could revolutionize mobility for users with limited dexterity or strength. His background repairing cars and creating makeshift medical equipment for his mother gave him insights that the traditionally trained engineers lacked, allowing him to approach problems from unexpected angles. Gradually, a few team members began to recognize the value of his unorthodox perspective. Sophia Bennett, a 32-year-old systems engineer who had spent 5 years being overlooked for promotion despite her exceptional work, was the first to openly align herself with Marcus's vision. Her support emboldened others, creating a small but dedicated core of innovators within the team. As their prototype control system took shape, even skeptical team members could not deny its potential to transform the user experience. 8 weeks into the project, Marcus was invited to present their progress to potential investors. The presentation exceeded expectations, with 2 venture capital firms expressing immediate interest in funding further development. Marcus returned to his office, energized by the positive response, only to discover that his computer had been locked out of the company network. The IT department claimed it was a routine security protocol, but the timing was suspicious. After regaining access the following day, Marcus found that critical design files had been deleted from both his local drive and the secure server where backups were stored. The company's version control system showed that the files had been properly saved just hours before the investor meeting, but a system glitch had apparently occurred during the network maintenance. With a crucial design review scheduled for the following week, Marcus and his core team worked through the weekend to reconstruct their work from memory and fragmented backup files. Late Sunday evening, as most of the team had finally gone home, Sophia remained, helping Marcus finalize the recovered designs. Her expression was troubled as she closed the office door before speaking. "This wasn't a glitch, Marcus. I saw Richard in the server room with one of the IT administrators right before your computer lost connection." She hesitated before continuing. "I've worked here long enough to recognize a deliberate takedown when I see one. This isn't the first time Richard has eliminated competition, but it's the most blatant I've witnessed." Marcus absorbed this confirmation of his suspicions, considering his limited options. "Without proof, it's my word against his, and we both know whose story will be believed." Sophia nodded grimly before retrieving a flash drive from her pocket. "That's why I've been keeping records. System logs, email exchanges, meeting recordings where Richard discussed ways to manage the situation you've created. Nothing explicitly racist, he's too careful for that, but enough to establish a pattern of targeted obstruction." Marcus stared at the flash drive, understanding the risk Sophia had taken to compile this evidence. "Why are you helping me? You've worked with Richard for years." She met his gaze steadily. "Because I've watched this company gradually shift from Eleanor's original vision of creating technology that serves people regardless of their circumstances to Richard's vision of serving only those deemed profitable enough. Your approach reminds me why I became an engineer in the first place." The following morning, Marcus requested a meeting with Human Resources to formally document the sabotage of his team's work. The HR director listened with practiced neutrality, taking notes but offering no indication of how she would proceed. 3 days later, Marcus received her response. An email explaining that after a thorough investigation, no evidence of deliberate interference had been found. The system logs showed routine maintenance, and the file deletions were attributed to user error or system instability. The email concluded with a reminder that Whitfield Technologies values inclusion and an offer to provide Marcus with additional technical training to prevent similar issues in the future. The condescension was unmistakable, as was the implication that Marcus was creating racial issues where none existed. That afternoon, news spread through the company that Eleanor Whitfield had been hospitalized following a fall at her home. Initial reports suggested the 78-year-old company founder would remain under observation for at least 2 weeks, perhaps longer if complications arose. As Marcus read the company-wide email announcement, a separate message arrived from Richard Kensington, informing him that in Eleanor's absence, all special projects would report directly to the executive committee, effective immediately. The message was clear. Marcus had just lost his only powerful advocate within the company, and Richard Kensington was moving quickly to reassert control. That evening, as Marcus helped his mother with her evening routine, he felt the weight of his increasingly precarious position. "They're trying to wait me out, Mom. With Eleanor gone, Richard has free rein to dismantle everything we've built." Vanessa Johnson studied her son's face, recognizing the determination beneath his exhaustion. When your father faced similar situations, he would say that sometimes you need to build a new door when all the existing ones are locked against you. Marcus nodded slowly, an idea taking shape. "I need to find leverage they can't ignore or explain away. Something that forces them to see the value of our work regardless of who created it." What neither of them could have anticipated was that the key to that leverage lay buried in their own family history, connected to the Whitfield name, in ways that would soon reshape the power dynamics within the company and beyond. The box of old family photographs had remained undisturbed in Marcus's closet since his father's death 5 years earlier, preserved but rarely examined due to the painful memories they evoked. On this particular Sunday, however, as Marcus searched for his father's engineering notebooks that might help with the adaptive control system, he found himself drawn to the collection of family history. His mother wheeled herself into his bedroom, watching as he carefully sorted through the fading images of relatives, many of whose names had been lost to time. A particular black-and-white photograph caught his attention. His grandmother, as a young woman, standing stiffly in a maid's uniform beside a grand staircase that looked oddly familiar. Turning the photo over, Marcus read the faded inscription, "Sarah Johnson, Whitfield Estate, 1964. His breath caught as the implication registered. "Mom, did Grandma Sarah work for the Whitfield family?" Vanessa's expression shifted, surprise giving way to a complex mixture of emotions. "Yes, for nearly 8 years." She never spoke much about that time. Marcus carefully placed the photo on his bed, his mind racing with questions. "Why didn't you ever mention this? Especially after I started working at Whitfield Technologies." Vanessa sighed deeply, adjusting her position in the wheelchair before responding. "Because it didn't end well, and some wounds never fully heal. Your grandmother was accused of stealing a diamond necklace from Eleanor Whitfield's personal jewelry collection. She was fired immediately, despite her protests of innocence. No charges were ever filed, but the accusation followed her for years, making it nearly impossible to find domestic work in Boston's wealthy neighborhoods." Marcus stared at the photograph, studying his grandmother's dignified expression, trying to reconcile this new information with his interactions with Eleanor. "Do you think Eleanor knows who I am? That I'm Sarah's grandson?" Vanessa shook her head slowly. "I doubt it. Sarah married your grandfather and changed her name to Johnson after leaving the Whitfield household. And it was over 60 years ago. Eleanor might not even remember the incident." But as Marcus thought about Eleanor's particular interest in him from the moment of their chance encounter during the snowstorm, he wasn't convinced their connection was entirely coincidental. Over the following days, Marcus discreetly researched the Whitfield family history, piecing together a timeline that coincided with his grandmother's employment. He discovered that the missing necklace had mysteriously reappeared months after Sarah's dismissal, found in the possession of Eleanor's younger sister during a visit to the family's summer home. Despite this discovery, no apology had ever been offered to Sarah Johnson, no attempt made to correct the damage to her reputation. While Marcus conducted his investigation, another player entered the complicated dynamic at Whitfield Technologies. Eleanor's son, William Whitfield, returned unexpectedly from his extended stay in Europe, ostensibly concerned about his mother's health. William, at 56, had never shown much interest in the company's operations, preferring to enjoy his substantial trust fund through a series of business ventures that inevitably failed despite generous family funding. His sudden appearance in the executive offices raised eyebrows, particularly when he began requesting detailed briefings on all current projects, including Marcus's adaptive control system. Richard Kensington wasted no time cultivating a relationship with the prodigal son, arranging private lunches and after-hours meetings that excluded other executives. Marcus learned of these developments through Sophia, whose network of allies throughout the company provided valuable intelligence. "William has been asking specific questions about you," she reported during a brief conversation in the company parking garage. "He seems particularly interested in your background and how you came to Eleanor's attention." That same afternoon, Marcus noticed increased surveillance of his activities. His team meetings were frequently interrupted by casual visits from senior managers who had previously ignored their work. His computer access logs showed that his files were being reviewed by administrators during off hours. Even his personal social media accounts showed signs of systematic scrutiny, with connection requests from unfamiliar accounts that disappeared when investigated. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to gather information that might discredit him or explain Eleanor's unusual patronage. Marcus maintained his focus on the adaptive control system, pushing his team toward the prototype demonstration scheduled for the following month. Privately, however, he began documenting the connections between his family history and the Whitfields, uncertain how or whether this information might eventually prove relevant to his increasingly precarious position. He was careful to store this research away from company property, using a personal laptop kept in a secure location at home. William Whitfield finally made direct contact 3 weeks after his return, appearing unannounced at Marcus's office late one evening. His casual demeanor barely concealed a calculating assessment as he inspected the prototype displayed on Marcus's workbench. "Fascinating work you're doing here, Johnson." Mother has always had an eye for unconventional talent. His emphasis on unconventional carried unmistakable subtext. "I understand you've made quite an impression in a remarkably short time. One might almost say your rise has been unprecedented." Marcus maintained a professional tone despite the clear implications. Mrs. Whitfield recognized the potential of our adaptive control system to help users with limited dexterity. "The technology speaks for itself." William's smile never reached his eyes. Yes, Mother has always been driven by her altruistic vision, sometimes at the expense of more practical considerations. The board has expressed concerns about the commercial viability of devices for such limited markets. He examined the prototype without asking permission, his manicured fingers carelessly adjusting components that had been precisely calibrated. "Between us, Johnson, I'm concerned about Mother's judgment recently. Her health issues may be affecting her decision-making more than she's willing to admit." The threat was thinly veiled. Eleanor's support might be undermined by suggestions of diminishing capacity. As William departed, his parting comment hung in the air like a storm warning. "I've always protected my family's interests, Johnson. It's practically a genetic imperative." That evening, as Marcus recounted the interaction to his mother, she recognized the danger immediately. "He's afraid, Marcus. Men like William define themselves by their inheritance, not just money, but position and influence. If he believes Eleanor sees you as somehow threatening that inheritance, he'll do whatever necessary to eliminate the perceived threat." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the forces aligning against him. "Richard wants me gone because I represent change he can't control. William wants me gone because he fears I have some claim on his mother's affection or resources. Together, they're dangerous." What neither Marcus nor Vanessa could have anticipated was how quickly and ruthlessly that danger would manifest, nor how thoroughly it would test everything Marcus had built at Whitfield Technologies. Eleanor Whitfield's return to company headquarters was announced with little fanfare, a simple email informing employees that the founder had resumed limited duties while continuing her recovery. Marcus received a separate message requesting his presence at her private office the following morning to discuss the adaptive control system's progress. The summons sent ripples through the executive floor, particularly after Eleanor's assistant mentioned that Marcus's presentation would be the only project review on Eleanor's schedule that week. Richard Kensington intercepted Marcus in the hallway shortly after the invitation arrived, his practiced corporate smile failing to mask his irritation. "Mrs. Whitfield's time is extremely valuable during her recovery period. I'd be happy to attend your meeting to help present the technical aspects that might be difficult for you to articulate properly." Marcus recognized the offer for what it was, an attempt to control the narrative and potentially undermine his work. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Kensington, but I'm confident in my ability to represent our team's progress accurately." Richard's smile tightened fractionally. "As you wish, but remember that Mrs. Whitfield has built this company on precision and excellence. Anything less would be disappointing." The implied threat was clear, but Marcus had anticipated such maneuvers. That afternoon, Eleanor made another unexpected announcement. Marcus would present the adaptive control system at the annual shareholders' meeting scheduled for the following month, a prestigious assignment typically reserved for senior executives with years of company experience. The news transformed the simmering resentment toward Marcus into open hostility from certain quarters. William Whitfield wasted no time arranging a private dinner with Richard Kensington that same evening. The two men sequestered in an exclusive Boston restaurant known for its discretion and private dining rooms. While they strategized, Marcus worked late finalizing the prototype that would demonstrate the adaptive control system's capabilities during his upcoming meeting with Eleanor. Sophia and two loyal team members remained to assist, their collective expertise overcoming the resource limitations that continued to plague the project. As they worked, Sophia shared disturbing information gleaned from her company contacts. "William has been reviewing all of Eleanor's recent decisions, particularly those involving you. He's also requested your complete employment file from HR, including your initial interview notes. Marcus nodded, unsurprised but concerned. He's looking for anything that might explain Eleanor's interest in me or my work, something beyond the obvious professional reasons. Sophia hesitated before continuing. There's more. He's been asking questions about Eleanor's mental acuity, suggesting to board members that her medical issues might have affected her judgment recently. The implications were alarming. William was potentially laying groundwork to challenge his mother's decision-making capacity, which could undermine her authority within the company she had founded. The following morning, Marcus arrived early for his appointment with Eleanor, navigating the executive floor where employees notably avoided eye contact or conversation with him. Eleanor's private office reflected her practical approach to luxury. Elegant but functional furnishings, awards displayed alongside family photographs, and mobility devices at various development stages arranged along one wall. Eleanor greeted him with her characteristic directness, her gaze sharp despite her recent hospitalization. "Show me what you've created, Mr. Johnson." For the next hour, Marcus demonstrated the adaptive control system, explaining how its sensitivity could be calibrated to accommodate users with varying degrees of dexterity limitation. Eleanor asked penetrating questions that tested both the technology's capabilities and Marcus's understanding of its applications. When the technical discussion concluded, Eleanor wheeled herself to the window overlooking Boston Harbor, her expression contemplative. "Your grandmother had that same methodical approach to problems." The statement hung in the air between them, confirming what Marcus had begun to suspect. Eleanor had recognized his connection to Sarah Johnson. "You knew who I was, from the beginning. It wasn't a question." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Not immediately, but after our interview, something about you seemed familiar. I had our security team run a background check, standard procedure for all potential hires with access to proprietary technology. When your grandmother's name appeared in your family history, I remembered Sarah. She was an exceptional woman working in circumstances that never recognized her true capabilities." Marcus absorbed this revelation, uncertain how it affected his position. "Is that why you hired me? Because of some connection to my grandmother?" Eleanor turned to face him directly, her expression unreadable. "I hired you because you fixed my wheelchair in a snowstorm without expecting recognition or reward. I promoted you because you identified critical flaws that our entire engineering department had missed. But yes, knowing your connection to Sarah made me pay particular attention to your potential." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "History has a way of offering opportunities for correction, Mr. Johnson. Not redemption. Some things can never be fully redeemed, but perhaps a rebalancing of accounts long overdue." Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor's assistant interrupted to announce that the board meeting scheduled for that afternoon had been moved up at William's request. Eleanor's expression hardened momentarily before returning to its usual composed state. "We'll continue this discussion soon. In the meantime, prepare your presentation for the shareholders' meeting. It's time your work received the recognition it deserves." As Marcus departed, he passed William in the hallway outside Eleanor's office. The older man's gaze was cold, his customary veneer of casual affability notably absent. That evening, as Marcus worked late finalizing details for the shareholder presentation, he received an urgent message from Sophia. Security camera footage from that afternoon showed Richard entering Marcus's office during the time Marcus had been meeting with Eleanor. A subsequent system log indicated that several files had been accessed from Marcus's computer during that period. Marcus immediately checked his design files, finding nothing obviously altered, but knowing that subtle sabotage would be nearly impossible to detect without a thorough review. He initiated a comprehensive comparison with backup files stored off the company network, a process that would take hours to complete. At midnight, with the analysis still running, Marcus finally prepared to leave. As he gathered his belongings, a security guard appeared at his office door. "Mr. Johnson? There's something unusual on the basement-level security cameras. You might want to take a look." The guard, An older black man named Harold, who had always treated Marcus with quiet respect, led him to the security monitoring station. The footage showed Richard Kensington and a member of the IT department entering the server room that housed the company's most sensitive data, including all project files and communications. The timestamp showed they had remained inside for 27 minutes before departing with what appeared to be an external storage device. Harold spoke quietly, his eyes on the monitors rather than Marcus. "Thought you should know. Some things ain't right around here lately." Marcus thanked him for the warning, understanding the risk the security guard had taken. As he finally drove home through Boston's empty streets, Marcus considered his increasingly precarious position. Someone was systematically building a case against him, while simultaneously gathering company information for purposes unknown. The shareholders' meeting was 3 weeks away, and Marcus sensed that whatever William and Richard were planning would come to fruition before then. The following morning brought confirmation of his fears. As Marcus entered his apartment building after his early morning run, 2 police officers approached him in the lobby. "Marcus Johnson? We have a warrant to search your residence in connection with an investigation of corporate espionage and theft of proprietary information from Whitfield Technologies." Marcus stood stunned as they presented the warrant, the reality of his situation crystallizing with terrible clarity. The trap had been sprung, and he had walked directly into it. The arrest of Marcus Johnson became breaking news across Boston by mid-morning, the story framed in predictable narratives that reinforced existing prejudices. "Rising executive arrested for corporate espionage," read the Boston Globe headline, while local television news described him as a recent hire from an unconventional background who had betrayed the trust of Eleanor Whitfield, the legendary philanthropist and business leader. The coverage prominently featured statements from Whitfield Technologies representatives expressing profound disappointment and emphasizing the company's commitment to protecting its groundbreaking intellectual property. Social media exploded with commentary, much of it speculating about Marcus's motives and character with thinly veiled racial undertones. Terms like ungrateful, unqualified, and diversity peppered discussion threads, the subtext clear to anyone willing to recognize it. The evidence against Marcus appeared substantial. Security footage showing him accessing secure servers at unusual hours, downloading large files to external devices, and communicating with email addresses linked to competitor companies. What the public couldn't know was that these digital breadcrumbs had been meticulously fabricated, created by manipulating timestamps, splicing footage, and falsifying system logs. Marcus spent 26 hours in police custody before his court appearance, where bail was set at $200,000, an amount well beyond his financial resources. His court-appointed attorney seemed overwhelmed by the case's complexity and the powerful interests aligned against her client. As Marcus was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, he glimpsed Richard Kensington and William Whitfield observing from the gallery, their expressions revealing nothing. News of his arrest reached Vanessa Johnson through a neighbor who recognized Marcus on television. Her health deteriorated rapidly as stress exacerbated her multiple sclerosis symptoms, a situation that became critical when Whitfield Technologies terminated Marcus's employment and health insurance coverage the day after his arrest. Without insurance, Vanessa's medications and treatments became financially impossible, forcing impossible choices between basic necessities and medical care. Meanwhile, at Whitfield Technologies, William Whitfield moved swiftly to consolidate control in Eleanor's continued absence. The official story maintained that Eleanor was recovering at her Beacon Hill home, but few employees had seen or communicated with her directly since her brief return. William installed Richard Kensington as Acting Chief Innovation Officer, giving him authority over all development projects, including the adaptive control system Marcus had pioneered. The prototype mysteriously malfunctioned during initial testing under Richard's supervision, reinforcing the narrative that Marcus's work had been fundamentally flawed or deliberately sabotaged. For a week, it seemed the carefully orchestrated destruction of Marcus Johnson had succeeded completely. Then, small acts of resistance began to emerge. Sophia Bennett quietly collected documentation of the system manipulations used to frame Marcus, carefully avoiding detection by using analog methods rather than digital trails that could be monitored. Harold, The security guard preserved unaltered copies of original security footage that contradicted the doctored versions presented to police. 3 members of Marcus's project team resigned simultaneously, citing ethical concerns about company practices in their departure letters. Most surprisingly, Marcus's community rallied around him with unexpected force. His fellow church members, neighbors, former classmates, and auto shop colleagues organized fundraisers for his legal defense, ultimately securing enough money to engage a respected defense attorney specializing in corporate law and digital evidence. Cambridge Technical Institute students organized protests outside Whitfield Technologies' headquarters, their presence drawing media attention that began to question the simplistic narrative of Marcus's guilt. As public interest in the case grew, a technology blogger began investigating inconsistencies in the timeline of events, noting that some of the allegedly stolen files hadn't even existed when Marcus supposedly downloaded them. The most significant development, however, occurred far from public view. Eleanor Whitfield, allegedly recuperating at her home under medical supervision, saw television coverage of Marcus's arrest while her caretakers were occupied elsewhere. The report included footage of her son William making statements on behalf of the company, using language and policies that directly contradicted Eleanor's founding vision. Disturbed by these revelations and her effective isolation from company operations, Eleanor began her own covert investigation, using her personal tablet to access news reports and company communications that had been deliberately kept from her. What she discovered evidence of her son's machinations, manipulated medical reports suggesting cognitive decline, and the systematic dismantling of Marcus's innovation work ignited a determination that belied her physical frailty. Through a private phone line unknown to her caretakers, Eleanor contacted her longtime personal attorney, initiating legal processes that would soon shock everyone involved in the conspiracy against Marcus Johnson. Meanwhile, Marcus had been released on bail thanks to his community's fundraising efforts, but remained under house arrest with strict limitations on his movements and communications. His new attorney, Elaine Watkins, worked methodically to deconstruct the prosecution's case, identifying numerous technical inconsistencies in the digital evidence. "The fabrication is sophisticated," she explained during a strategy session in Marcus's apartment, "but they made critical errors in their haste. The metadata doesn't align with the alleged timeline, and several server logs show impossible access patterns that no court expert will validate." While this legal battle progressed, Marcus focused on caring for his mother, whose health had stabilized somewhat but remained precarious without proper medical support. He converted his kitchen table into a makeshift engineering station, continuing to refine the adaptive control system designs using basic tools and salvaged components. His determination to complete his work, despite everything arrayed against him, stemmed from a promise he'd made to his mother during their darkest moment after his arrest. "This isn't just about clearing my name anymore, Mom. It's about proving that systems designed to exclude people like us can't stop ideas that deserve to exist." Vanessa, despite her pain, had smiled at his words. "That sounds exactly like what your grandmother would say." The mention of his grandmother had sparked a new line of thinking for Marcus, one that connected his current situation to the historic injustice Sarah Johnson had faced decades earlier. Both had been falsely accused by the Whitfield family, their reputations damaged and livelihoods threatened based on fabricated evidence. The parallel was too precise to be coincidental, suggesting that William's actions might be driven by more than just corporate power struggles or inheritance concerns. As Marcus pondered this connection, working late into the night on his prototype, an unexpected visitor arrived at his apartment building. The security buzzer sounded at 11:30, revealing an elderly woman in a wheelchair, accompanied by a middle-aged woman in professional attire. "Marcus Johnson," Eleanor Whitfield's voice crackled through the intercom. "I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss." The small garage where Marcus had returned to work, repairing cars while awaiting trial, smelled of motor oil and metal, comforting scents that reminded him of simpler days before Whitfield Technologies had entered his life. Frank Benson, the shop's owner, had rehired Marcus without hesitation despite the pending criminal charges, stating simply, "I know quality work and character when I see it," and neither changes because some rich folks point fingers. The arrangement allowed Marcus to earn enough to cover basic living expenses while maintaining the flexible schedule required for his mother's care and legal meetings. He was deep under the hood of a 1998 Toyota Camry when the sleek black Bentley pulled into the parking lot, immediately out of place among the modest vehicles typically serviced at Benson's Auto Repair. Marcus straightened as Eleanor Whitfield was helped from the back seat into her wheelchair by her personal assistant, her arrival drawing stunned stares from the other mechanics. Frank emerged from his office, wiping his hands on a shop towel as he approached the unexpected visitor, Mrs. Whitfield. He greeted her with surprising familiarity. "Been about 20 years since you brought that custom Lincoln in for me to look at." Eleanor nodded with a hint of a smile. "Your reputation for discretion was accurate then, Frank, and I'm counting on it now as well." Frank glanced at Marcus before responding, "My shop, my rules. Whatever business you have with my mechanic stays between you." He retreated to his office, closing the door to provide privacy. Eleanor's assistant similarly withdrew to the waiting area, leaving Marcus and Eleanor alone among the partially disassembled vehicles. "You're difficult to find when one is being monitored by one's own security team," Eleanor observed, her hands resting calmly on the wheels of her chair. "My son has been quite thorough in his efforts to control my movements and communications since my health emergency." Marcus set down his tools carefully, wiping grease from his hands. "I was under the impression you were recuperating at home under medical supervision." A flash of irritation crossed Eleanor's face. "A convenient narrative that allowed William to isolate me while he dismantled everything I've built over the past 40 years. My medical team reports directly to him, and my supposedly serious condition has been greatly exaggerated to justify keeping me away from company operations." Marcus processed this information, pieces of the puzzle shifting into place. "How did you get away?" Eleanor's smile held a hint of mischief. "One advantage of being underestimated due to age and disability is that people become careless in their surveillance. My primary nurse is more loyal to me than to her paycheck from William. She helped arrange this excursion under the guise of a medical consultation." Eleanor wheeled herself closer, her expression becoming serious. "I know about your grandmother, Marcus. I know about Sarah Johnson and the necklace she was accused of stealing." The directness of her statement caught Marcus off guard. "You knew who I was from the beginning," he responded. Not a question, but a realization. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Not immediately. When you repaired my wheelchair during the snowstorm, I saw only a kind young man with exceptional mechanical aptitude, but something about you seemed familiar, so I had my assistant investigate after our meeting. When I learned your connection to Sarah, I understood that fate had offered a rare opportunity to address an old injustice." Marcus absorbed this revelation, emotions conflicting as he considered its implications. "So my hiring, the special project, all of it was because of my grandmother, not my abilities?" Eleanor's response was immediate and firm. "Your abilities are exceptional, Marcus. I would never place someone in a position they weren't qualified for, regardless of personal considerations. But yes, your connection to Sarah influenced my decision to look more closely at your potential when others might have overlooked it." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "What happened to Sarah was unconscionable. The necklace was found in my sister's possession months after Sarah was dismissed, but my father refused to acknowledge the error or make amends. His pride and prejudice outweighed basic human decency." Marcus remained silent, processing both the confirmation of his grandmother's innocence and Eleanor's role in the decades-old injustice. "My silence at the time was its own form of complicity," Eleanor continued, her voice lowered with regret. "I was young, still dependent on my family's approval and financial support. By the time I had established my independence and founded Whitfield Technologies, Sarah had disappeared from our orbit entirely. I tried to locate her years later, but she had changed her name after marriage and moved away from Boston." Marcus studied Eleanor's face, recognizing genuine remorse beneath her composed exterior. "Why are you telling me this now?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "Because history is repeating itself in the worst possible way. My son and Richard Kensington have orchestrated your destruction using the same tactics my family employed against your grandmother. false accusations, fabricated evidence, and the confident assumption that power and privilege would ensure their success without consequence. She reached into a portfolio her assistant had placed on her lap, withdrawing a flash drive. "This contains evidence I've been gathering since learning of your arrest. Security footage William doesn't know exists. Original server logs my late husband insisted be maintained on a separate system. Email exchanges between William and Richard discussing their plan to frame you and seize control of the company." Marcus accepted the drive carefully, understanding its potential value to his defense. Why would William go to these lengths? The adaptive control system is innovative, but hardly worth destroying someone's life over. Eleanor's expression darkened. The technology itself was never the primary concern. William's actions are driven by fear. Fear that I might recognize in you the potential I never saw in him. My son has spent his life waiting to inherit what he could never build himself, and he perceived your rapid rise as a threat to his assumed birthright. As Marcus contemplated this explanation, Eleanor continued, her voice strengthening with resolve. "The shareholders' meeting is tomorrow afternoon. William and Richard plan to formally announce your replacement and present the adaptive control technology as their own innovation, with significant modifications that actually reduce its effectiveness for users with severe dexterity limitations." She leaned forward, intensity radiating from her slight frame. "I intend to attend that meeting, Marcus, and I would like you to accompany me." The request was so unexpected that Marcus nearly laughed. "I'm under house arrest pending trial for allegedly stealing from your company. I can't exactly walk into your shareholders' meeting." Eleanor smiled thinly. "Your attorney should be receiving a call shortly from the district attorney's office. The evidence I've provided through back channels has raised significant questions about the case against you. I expect the monitoring device will be removed from your ankle by this evening, with formal dismissal of charges to follow after certain legal procedures are observed." For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt a glimmer of genuine hope. Still, practical concerns remained. Even if the legal restrictions are lifted, William and Richard will have security preventing me from entering the building. Eleanor's smile widened fractionally. "Did you know that the original corporate charter for Whitfield Technologies grants the founder certain irrevocable privileges? Among them is the right to bring personal guests to any company function without advance approval or restriction. A provision my late husband insisted upon to prevent exactly the type of corporate maneuvering William has attempted." She extended her hand to Marcus, a gesture that transcended their complicated history and power differential. "Tomorrow, we end this cycle of injustice, Mr. Johnson. Together." Marcus hesitated only briefly, before accepting her hand, their clasp sealing an alliance that would soon shake Whitfield Technologies to its foundations. Neither could have predicted just how completely the company's power structure would be transformed, nor the stunning revelations that would emerge during the confrontation to come. The annual Whitfield Technologies shareholders meeting traditionally combined corporate formality with technological spectacle, the company's latest innovations prominently displayed to impress investors and industry analysts. This year's event, held in the grand ballroom of Boston's historic Parker House Hotel, featured enhanced security measures ostensibly due to the recent corporate espionage case. Security personnel discreetly stationed at every entrance examined identification and cross-referenced attendance lists with practiced efficiency. William Whitfield circulated among early arrivals, projecting confidence as he accepted congratulations on his leadership during his mother's health challenges. Richard Kensington similarly moved through the crowd, directing staff and ensuring the prototype mobility devices were perfectly positioned for the planned demonstration. Neither man noticed the service elevator arriving at the kitchen entrance, nor the hotel staff assisting an elderly woman in a wheelchair and her companions through the back hallways reserved for employees. Eleanor Whitfield had timed their arrival precisely, entering the ballroom through a side door just as William approached the podium to commence the formal proceedings. The room fell silent as attendees recognized the company founder, whispers spreading rapidly as Eleanor wheeled herself confidently down the center aisle. Marcus and Sophia followed close behind, their presence causing visible shock among the executives who had orchestrated Marcus's downfall. William froze momentarily before recovering his composure, his voice betraying only slight tension as he addressed his mother. "Mother, what a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you to feel well enough to attend today. Perhaps we should arrange a comfortable seat in the front row." Eleanor continued her advance toward the stage, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "I believe the founder's place is at the podium, William, particularly when such significant announcements are being made regarding the company's future." The tension in the ballroom escalated as mother and son engaged in a silent battle of wills, corporate politics laid bare before hundreds of witnesses. William glanced desperately toward Richard Kensington, who had moved to intercept Marcus and Sophia before they could reach the display area, containing the prototype mobility devices. Eleanor's voice cut through the murmurs of the confused audience. "Before my son continues with his planned agenda, I believe some clarifications are in order." She positioned her wheelchair beside William at the podium, effectively claiming equal standing. "Many of you have heard about recent unfortunate events involving alleged corporate espionage. What you haven't been told is that these allegations were fabricated as part of a systematic attempt to seize control of this company and redirect its fundamental mission." Gasps and exclamations rippled through the audience as Eleanor gestured for Marcus to join her on stage. William's face contorted with barely suppressed fury as he leaned toward his mother, whispering urgently, "This is inappropriate and irresponsible. Your health issues have clearly affected your judgment. We can discuss this privately," after Eleanor silenced him with a raised hand. "My health is sufficient for me to recognize betrayal, William, both of this company's founding principles and of basic human decency." She addressed the audience directly, her voice strengthening with each word. Marcus Johnson was falsely accused of stealing intellectual property that he himself created. The evidence against him was manufactured by individuals within our company who felt threatened by true innovation and the recognition of merit regardless of background. William attempted to regain control, his smile strained as he addressed the shareholders. "My mother's dedication to this company has always been admirable, but her recent medical challenges have unfortunately affected her perception of certain events. I assure you that our security team conducted a thorough investigation before any accusations were made." Eleanor nodded to Sophia, who connected a laptop to the presentation system. The large screens throughout the ballroom displayed security footage, email exchanges, and server logs that methodically dismantled the case against Marcus, while implicating William and Richard in the conspiracy. As the evidence accumulated on screen, Richard attempted to approach the podium, but was intercepted by hotel security, responding to prearranged instructions from Eleanor's attorney. The documentation was damning, leaving little room for misinterpretation. The audience's shock transformed into murmurs of disapproval directed at William and Richard rather than Marcus. Eleanor allowed the evidence to speak for itself before continuing. Whitfield Technologies was founded with a mission to create mobility solutions for those whom society too often overlooks or undervalues. This mission was personal for me after my husband's return from Vietnam, with injuries that traditional medical devices failed to adequately address. She gestured toward Marcus. "Mr. Johnson embodies the innovative spirit and humanitarian focus that built this company. His adaptive control system represents exactly the kind of breakthrough thinking we should be nurturing, not destroying out of fear or prejudice." William made a final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Mother, regardless of these misunderstandings, there are legitimate questions about company leadership and succession that the board has been discussing. Your health concerns have accelerated necessary conversations about the future." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Indeed. Let's discuss succession, William." She nodded to her attorney, who distributed documents to board members present in the audience. "These papers may interest the board and our shareholders. They contain evidence that William Whitfield is not, in fact, my biological son." The revelations sent shockwaves through the ballroom. William's face drained of color as Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. "My biological son, Jonathan, died in infancy shortly after my husband's return from Vietnam. In our grief, we adopted William, who was born to my husband's cousin following an unplanned pregnancy. We raised him as our own, never intending to reveal these circumstances. She turned to face William directly. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity to grow into the kind of leader who could continue this company's mission. Yet you chose to view Whitfield Technologies merely as an inheritance to be claimed, rather than a legacy to be earned. William's composure shattered entirely. You kept this from me my entire life? You let me believe I was a Whitfield by blood, only to publicly humiliate me when it became convenient? His voice rose with each word, decades of insecurity crystallizing into rage. Everything I've done was to protect what should rightfully be mine. In his emotional breakdown, William inadvertently confirmed his role in the conspiracy against Marcus, admitting to orchestrating the false evidence and manipulating his mother's medical reports to suggest cognitive decline. The shareholders watched in stunned silence as the family drama unfolded, corporate politics suddenly overshadowed by raw human emotion. Eleanor remained calm as William's anger spent itself. The company was never an inheritance to be claimed by birth, William. It was always a responsibility to be earned through commitment to its founding purpose. She turned back to the audience. I am not announcing William's removal from the company today. That decision belongs to our board of directors, who now have all the facts before them. What I am announcing is the establishment of the Whitfield Innovation Trust, which will hold controlling interest in Whitfield Technologies moving forward. Eleanor gestured toward Marcus. This trust will be managed by a diverse board of technology leaders committed to ensuring our company's innovations benefit all communities equally, with Mr. Johnson serving as the inaugural Chief Innovation Officer. Marcus stepped forward, the significance of the moment not lost on him or the audience. His voice carried clearly as he addressed the shareholders directly. The adaptive control system we've developed represents just the beginning of what's possible when technology truly serves human needs, regardless of economic status or physical ability. I look forward to building on Eleanor Whitfield's legacy while expanding the company's vision to include perspectives that have historically been excluded from technological innovation. As Marcus outlined his vision for the company's future, Richard Kensington was quietly escorted from the premises by security personnel, his resignation to be announced in a press release later that day. William remained on stage, physically present but emotionally shattered by revelations that had transformed his understanding of both his past and future. The final revelation came as Eleanor concluded the presentation, her voice softening as she addressed a more personal aspect of the day's events. There is one additional connection that should be acknowledged today. Marcus Johnson's grandmother, Sarah Johnson, once worked for my family. She was falsely accused of theft and dismissed without justification, an injustice I failed to correct at the time. Eleanor turned to face Marcus directly. What few people know is that my late husband's family once owned the plantation where Marcus's ancestors were enslaved before emancipation. This historical connection represents a debt that can never truly be repaid, but must be acknowledged if we are to move forward with integrity. The shareholders sat in stunned silence, corporate platitudes and financial projections suddenly overshadowed by the weight of historical injustice and personal accountability. Eleanor's final words resonated throughout the ballroom. Whitfield Technologies was founded to overcome barriers that limit human potential. Today, we recommit to that mission with a broader understanding of what those barriers truly are and how deeply rooted they remain in our society. The technology we create means nothing if it doesn't serve the cause of human dignity and opportunity for all. The shareholders' meeting concluded with unprecedented applause, not for financial projections or market expansion plans, but for a vision of corporate responsibility that acknowledged past wrongs while committing to a more equitable future. As media representatives swarmed forward seeking statements from Eleanor and Marcus, William slipped quietly from the stage, his carefully constructed identity shattered beyond repair. Outside the hotel, Vanessa Johnson waited in a specially equipped vehicle Eleanor had arranged for her comfort. When Marcus emerged to share the day's events, mother and son embraced, both understanding that while justice had finally been served, the path forward would bring its own challenges and responsibilities. 1 month later, the newly restructured Whitfield Innovation Trust launched its first initiative, a scholarship foundation supporting minority engineering students, named after Sarah Johnson. The announcement made headlines briefly before being absorbed into the constant flow of business news. What remained unreported was the private dinner held at Eleanor Whitfield's Beacon Hill home, where Marcus and Vanessa Johnson sat as honored guests rather than staff, the cycle of history disrupted at last by courage, integrity, and the recognition of human dignity that transcends the artificial barriers of race and class. What would you do if you discovered someone in power had wronged your family in the past? Would you seek revenge or work toward reconciliation like Marcus did in our story? Comment below with your thoughts on how we should address historical injustices in today's world. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might find meaning in Marcus and Eleanor's journey toward healing and justice. Thank you for joining us today, and may we all find the courage to confront the past while building a more equitable future together.